Hi, everyone, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode number 95. And the title of this episode is Something Evil is Coming This Summer. And there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot going on. And we're seeing gold being pushed down again. It's around $1,200 now, and most likely it'll probably go under $1,200. And we're seeing a two-day push now, just like we saw prior to the Boston bombing. And it just so happens to coincide with a cyber attack drill, which is called Quantum Dawn 2, which is happening to 50 or so banks, financial firms, and companies on Wall Street, where DHS is having a specialized drill to simulate cyber attacks. And, you know, if you haven't already, I would start removing some money out of the banks, because it's very strange that they decided to do this on a Friday, and gold is being smacked down, and just something does not feel right. Now, listen, hey, I mean, anything can happen, but just it feels like everything is in alignment, and it feels like something is going to happen. And hey, I would remove my money from the bank anyhow, because of the bail-ins that are eventually going to reach America. And once that happens and your accounts are frozen, that is it. Game over for you. And we saw this happen in Cyprus. And despite the capital controls in Cyprus, the people who still can get money out, which is a little bit each day, they are just continually taking it out. Of course, they can't touch the frozen money, and the money that was taken from them they can't have, and the money that was traded in for worthless bank stock they can't touch. But whatever they can take, they are taking. And basically, the Cyprus deposits slide to the lowest level since mid-2008. And what does that tell you? Who wants to put any money into the bank? It's not safe there. The bank is actually stealing it from you. And I remember when I was younger, banks were supposed to protect your money from robbers, and who knew that the banks would be the robbers? I mean, it just seems so crazy. But that is what, and this is going to sweep across Europe and eventually into America. And basically, if you remember back to March of 2013, when they said that this will be the template for Europe, and then they all decided to downplay it, that this is not going to be the template. And then we found out there was an FDIC Bank of England document that was created on December of 2012, mapping out how the bail-ins will work. All of a sudden today, we see Europe make Cyprus bail-in regime continental template. And it turns out that for Europe, Cyprus was the bail-in template after all, and following an agreement reached early this morning, Europe now has a joint failed bank resolution mechanism. And the EU finance minister announced that they had reached an agreement on the principles governing the imposition of losses on creditors in banks, which are now called bail-ins. You have to remember, if you look at your terms of service from your bank, and I did this a couple episodes ago, you are now considered a creditor. And the banks are not responsible for your money if it's lost via riots, war, a cyber attack, computer malfunctions, and they give a whole list of things. And all the banks that I checked on all now have this added to their terms of service. Plus, you cannot hold the officers or representatives of the banks responsible for the loss of your money. So now we see this as a failed bank resolution in Europe. There's already one in place for America and England. We saw the test case in Cyprus, and it worked so well. There were no riots. Capital controls are still in effect. People still can't get their money, and the central bankers hold all the cards. So this is going to sweep across Europe, and for those people who are living in Europe, if you haven't taken your money out yet, I would suggest doing so, and especially with this Quantum Dawn 2 drill cyber attack coming up Friday. I mean, what's the worst case scenario? If you don't believe me, or you're like, oh, that's ridiculous, so what? You take some cash out. If nothing happens, you put it back in. What's the big deal? It's almost like prepping. When I talk to people and I say, I'm prepping, I have food, I have water, I have medicine, and they sit there and they laugh, and I go, well, why? What's the worst thing that happens? You eat the food? You use your medicine if nothing happens? You didn't waste it. It's all good stuff. The water, I'll drink it. So basically, you didn't lose anything. So I'd rather be prepared with all this, have cash on hand, have gold and silver. I mean, right now I think it's more important to have cash and to have food and water, weapons, and all of this in place because of basically what the government needs to do before the collapse. And I believe this is going to happen throughout the summer, and we're going to see some crazy events happening during this summer. And it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be downright evil. It's going to scare the shit out of people. People who've been sleeping, they are not going to know what's going on. Now, I mean, I'll get back on track here. Everything that we're seeing right now, they're telling us that the economy's recovering, everything is fine, and Ireland is officially back in recession. You have to remember, Europe has the highest unemployment they have ever seen. Youth unemployment in many of the countries in Europe are between 50 and 60%. And to keep the illusion in America, so no one is none the wiser, they changed the calculation for unemployment, GDP, and inflation back in 2008. If we used the same formula they used previous, unemployment is around 23%. They also, just recently, I think this was June 11th, they changed the gauge of the amount of jobs needed to have the economy grow. It used to be 150,000. Now they're saying we only need to get up to 80,000. So basically, they are just manipulating all the numbers so nobody is the wiser. And also, if you compare it back to the Great Depression time, before the stock market crash, you saw soup, bread lines, people looking for work. Today, they figured out how to keep the illusion going. And what they did was they created food stamps. And actually, it's not even food stamps anymore. It looks just like an everyday credit card. So nobody will ever know. They have government assistance. They have government health insurance, where if you don't have a job, many of the states, I would say the majority, will give you health insurance. They also have welfare for the people. So when you look around, you will never see a bread line, a soup line. Every once in a while, you will see people on the street with their families, and I see it a lot, where they're looking for work. But most of the time, you can apply, go into government housing assistance. They'll give you money for that. And, hey, you can also get an Obama phone. But this is how we know the illusion of everyone looking at the stock market is working, because nobody sees anything else that's going on. And this article about Ireland is saying that the economic growth in Ireland shrank by 0.6%, making its third successive quarter of contraction. And they are back into recession. I hate to say it, but most of the European and the U.S. are in recession, in a deep recession. Most of the people just don't realize it. And another factor to let us know that things are not going well is real disposable income is falling at 2008 rates. Basically what that means, the extra money that you have, people don't have it anymore. Where they use it to, go out to dinner, go on trips, buy fancy TVs, and basically this article goes on to say that everyone is looking at the GDP growth, but if you look at the real per capita disposable income, which fell at an annualized rate of 9.21%. That is truly staggering collapse in incomes. The last time we even saw anything close to this was in the third quarter of 2008. And if we use common sense and we use our brains, most of the people are either underemployed or do not have work. Now, how do we know this is true and it's not true? Because and we know that the government is lying, I should say, because if you look at their unemployment figures, they're saying what? Unemployment is at 7.6%. How could the real per capita disposable income drop so dramatically if unemployment is only at 7.6%? When you compare it to the real unemployment, which is at 23%, with people underemployed, where maybe they were making $60,000 and now they're only making $30,000, where they just have enough to keep their rent, their food on the table, and to pay car payments, and they have nothing else that's extra. And especially all those other people that are completely out of work, that have no income whatsoever. So this is how the real economy shows you what's going on compared to the fake illusion of the government. All right, let's move on here. Now, Americans are opposing arming Syria militants. About 70% of Americans surveyed by the Pew Research Center between June 12th and 16th said they're against any plans of arming the Syrian rebels. And I kind of agree with that, because most Americans don't even understand why we're there. They don't want to be there. They let Syria fight for themselves, but what they don't understand, this has nothing to do with that. This has to do with the U.S. government and the central bankers needing to control those countries that are not trading in the reserve currency, which is the U.S. dollar. And basically, the government needs to keep the empire going, or everything collapses at this point in time, and they can't have it collapse just yet because there are certain things they need. But they do need the war to be escalated to cover up what is coming. Now, if we look to see what's going on, and we can see this war machine building, the United States is going to lose access to key military base after Russian ally cancels Lease. Now, a base in, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Kyrgyzstan, is a strategic location which is smack in the middle of China, Russia, and Afghanistan and India. So it's a strategic location for the U.S. And basically, the United States will lose access to this military base because the lease is coming up in 2014. And there being pressure from Russia to not renew the lease to the United States, because Russia knows, and they're setting everything up for this war, because they know the United States does not want peace. They can't have peace because this has nothing to do with the people. This has to do with keeping everything intact with the reserve currency and setting up central banks in these countries. So the Russian, all these peace talks with John Kerry and all this other crap is a cover story for all those Americans that are asleep, to feel like America is going out there talking about peace. But every time they do this, just forget about what's on the surface. Look beyond that. Peace never happens. It always is just talk, and it always breaks down, because the United States government and the central bankers do not want peace. And we see this happening over and over again. And basically what's happening now is the U.S., the CIA, is stockpiling arms in Jordan for U.S.-trained Syrian rebels. And remember when they said they were sending over weapons to Jordan for drills, F-16s, and other weapons, and now they're staying there because of what's happening in Syria. Basically, this is all planned out. All this training and sending troops in to advise is a bunch of BS. This is the cover story to make Americans think, oh, we're just going over there to help them. We're not really getting involved. No, no, no. We are involved, which I mean the United States government and the central bankers. They are purposely putting these people in place because eventually the war will be on. And now the U.S. is sending military training teams to Lebanon and Iraq because what's happening is the United States government, central bankers have put these puppet governments into Iraq and Lebanon, all the countries that we took over and we implemented as central bank, and we put them back on the reserve currency of the U.S. dollar. A lot of the people, okay, are rising up now saying, no, we don't want this. So basically, what are we going to say? That there's another revolution and we have to go back there? No. Instead, we're going to send people back there to be advisors, to bolster security, and what does it say here? Have sending military trainers to Lebanon and Iraq, just to teach them how to ward off these revolutionists that are rising up again. Because you have to remember, the agencies in the U.S. paid mercenaries to overthrow the governments in these countries. So the central banks could set up, switch everything back to the reserve currency, and now the real people, the real revolution is starting. And this is, now they're getting nervous, the central bankers in the U.S. government, because things are falling apart. And the Syria fighting is starting to spill over into these countries, and other countries are getting wind that, wait a minute, these aren't really revolutionists. These are paid mercenaries. These aren't part of us, because most of them are not even Syrian, and most of them in the other countries weren't even Lebanese or from their country. And basically, the central bankers in the U.S. government are getting nervous, so they have to send troops over there again to hold the fort down. Remember, like Rome, with the empire, there was spread so thin that it was very hard to maintain. The same thing is happening now. Now, since we know this is going to be a world war, U.S. and Japan are practicing capturing an island, and they're using San Clemente Island off the coast of California, and they're basically mimicking an armed invasion and an amphibious assault to prepare for real-life scenarios of the Japanese taking over the Senkaku Islands. And they are why else would they be training? They are training with 80 U.S. Marines, 3 MV-22 Osprey aircraft, and the Japanese counterattack using 1,000 troops and 2 warships. And they are doing this because they know eventually they will be invading and attacking China, and we will have a war with Syria, Iran, which Russia then will come into play. China will come into play. The Japan will fire at China, and everything, the house of cards starts tumbling down, and we are now into World War III. And this is what they're doing. This is what the central banks are pushing for, the U.S. government is pushing for. They are not going for peace, they are going for war. The end. That's it. Now, I said this in other episodes. The main objective of the U.S. government right now is to get every single gun away from the American people. This has nothing to do with the shootings in Sandy Hook, in Aurora. Their main objective is to disarm the American people. And they need to do this before the collapse, because a disarmed people is much easier to control than an armed people. So basically what they need to do is they need to create many, many laws or taxes or restrictions or whatever you want to call them to control the sale of guns. And of course the Second Amendment says, anything that's limiting, which infringe means, or undermining the Second Amendment is null and void, but they don't care. So basically, Obama administration pushes a new public health research agenda on gun control. In the near future, Americans who own or want guns will be subject to a raft of new questions from social scientists, medical researchers, and law enforcement officials intent to discover just what guns they own, why they own them, and what they intend to use them for, not to mention where and how they keep them. So basically, they are cracking down, and they will use any method possible first to see if they can get the guns. Now, if all this doesn't work, guess what happens? Some type of false flag where they can declare martial law, and they can just go in and confiscate the guns from Americans and tell us this ridiculous story that it's for our safety, martial law has been declared, and you have to remember the president, with the executive order of the preparedness executive order, he can declare without Congress or anyone else a state emergency and martial law whenever he sees fit. So, and basically what they're trying to do right now is they will also likely have more researchers poring over such issues as whether childhood education programs against gun violence actually work. And every time you see articles that are coming out right now, it's usually things that have already been in place and been working. So we're months behind when these articles come out. I'll give you an example. For those who are new to this, I have children, and they were just sent to this program in the school. The parents had to give permission, and it was called Project Sentry, where they taught them about gun violence, and they only showed them one side of what happens with guns. And they listened to 911 calls about children who shot themselves, and they tried to scare the crap out of the children. They didn't show how guns protect people. They don't show guns in any other way. They don't even mention the Second Amendment. And I put that Project Sentry up and on one of the episodes I did, and you can download it if you need it. So we already see this happening, and we already see them trying to brainwash the children. It's the same thing they did in Nazi Germany. They started with the youth. They brainwashed them in the beginning, and they created the brown shirts, and most of the brown shirts were children, young adults inducted into this service. Now, Obama-ordered gun report reveals gun actually saved lives in a recent study, and basically he was trying to prove that medically and order reports showing that guns are no good but in saving lives. But what happened was the report showed the opposite. In a recent study orchestrated by the CDC and carried out by the Institute of Medicine and National Research Council, it was found that individuals involved in violent crimes who defended themselves using techniques other than carrying a gun were more likely to be injured when compared to those who were carrying a concealed firearm. So basically this backfired, and it was leaked, and they're trying to put together of why they need gun control. And I linked the report here to this page, so if you'd like to see that, you can. Now, the mayors are leaving the Bloomberg gun grab organizations over lies and witch hunts. Mayors for gun control, which Bloomberg started, is now starting to fall apart because mayors are starting to drop out because they thought they were going into this to help keep illegal guns off the streets, but what they realized is Mayor Bloomberg wants all guns off the street, and a lot of them are getting wind of this, and they're calling it a witch hunt, and they're going after people, and this is basically what we're seeing here. Now, moving on here. Senator Dick Durbin, it's time to say who's a real reporter and who isn't. Now, we have to go back in time here to see why he is proposing this and why they're trying to do this. Back in 1913, when the Federal Reserve was created, it wasn't the only thing was to control the money supply. They also knew that they had to control the flow of information. So over the years and over time, what they've done was consolidate all the news agencies into 5. And these news agencies receive the majority of their news from the Associated Press, which receives their news from the government. No one does any type of investigative reporting anymore. No one does anything. They're just spewing out propaganda and letting all the people believe what the government wants them to believe. So now these central bankers and the elite or the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, they control the flow of information. They control the money supply. When you control both, you control the world. And what happened since then was something called the Internet. The Internet was born, and what happened? Bloggers started to investigate different news stories. Alternative media started to pop up. Alternative media radio stations and channels started to pop up. YouTube gave the ability for more and more people to show different sides of the same story. So now what the government is trying to do is to license those people who they believe are the real journalists. The bloggers aren't, the alternative media aren't, and they can accept or reject who they want. And all those who are not licensed will not be able to report on news. And what they're trying to do is gain control again of the flow of information. And this is why they're coming out and doing this. And you'll see later on in this report why this is so important. But let's move on right here. Now, the Pentagon is revising cyber attack responses, Dempsey says. And basically what has come out here is that the Defense Department is rewriting the rules of engagement for responding to computer assaults on military networks, Army General Martin Dempsey, the top U.S. military official, said today. What they're doing is, and again, like I said before, even though we're hearing about this right now, this is already in place. I'm sure of it. They are creating a separate network, a separate internet network, completely secure, not connected to the current internet today. And this will be wireless, and you'll use special iPads, special iPhones, and the government will use this system. And the reason why they have this in place is because when the cyber attack hits and the internet is killed, to prevent any further attacks, and we can use the example of 9/11. When 9/11 happened, and we heard it was planes flying into the towers, if you believe that official story, they closed down and they shut down all flights within the country. In the Boston bombing, the DHS said they do not have any type of kill switch to shut off anything, but they did. They shut off the cell towers in an instant, and that was pretty fast how they did this. But they didn't realize, of course, then people still could take pictures. But now what they're doing is they already have the network set up, a separate secure network, a 4G wireless network, to be enabled when the cyber attack hits and the internet is shut down. Plus, Since, let me just go back for a sec, DHS learned since, and this was in my previous episodes way back, that they learned that just shutting off the cell tower doesn't really help. They proposed, and I'm sure it's already being downloaded to everyone's phone, and it's already been done, a special kill switch for each individual phone. And you're like, well, my phone doesn't have it. Yeah, but you have to remember, every time your phone gets an update, you really don't know what's in that update, especially to the phone OS system. And yes, some phones, will not have it, but, when you go out and you buy a new phone, it will already have it. So it's a very simple thing to do to everyone's phone. And let me just go back to this, is basically in this article, of course they mention, that since October 2011, intrusions into the U.S. critical infrastructure, including computer systems that operate chemical, electrical, water transportation systems, had increased 17-fold. And they always mention the infrastructure to cyber attacks. They always mention, the extremist groups could be destructive as the terrorist attack of 9/11, and this is all in the same article. But this is what they're proposing to do. Now, someone on YouTube, let me just get the name here, Marjos Dogwalker, pointed me to this video by Naomi Wolf, and I can't believe I haven't seen this before, and it is fantastic. I placed this video on the x22report.com site. Just click on video itself, and it's the top video that's right there, so you can just view it right there. Even though when you go to video, it drops down a menu, just click on video, and there are more videos that are just individual videos. But she points out 10 steps to close down an open society. And this was done April 24th, 2007. She wrote a book. And she is saying that every dictator follows these 10 steps. And when I watched it and I read it, holy crap. So here we go. The first one, invoke a terrifying internal and external enemy. Creating a terrifying threat, Hydra-like, secretive, evil, is an old trick. So basically what they have done they have created terrorism, Al-Qaeda. They took down the World Trade Center in 2001. They continually terrorize us every day in the airports, with TSA, with DHS, and the Boston bombing. So we can see this happening right here today. So number one, basically, they are on the path. Number two, the government needs to create a gulag. And once you've gotten everyone scared, the next step is to create a prison system which is outside the rule of law. Guantanamo Bay is the gulag. And President Obama keeps saying he's going to close this down. And you have to remember, every time government officials say they're going to do something, it's always the opposite. He's going to close it down. He's going to close it down. He doesn't need Congress to close it down. He can do it with a signature from his pen to close it down. But they don't want to close it down because that's where they torture people. That's where they keep people out of the rule of law. So we already have the gulag set up. Let's move on to number three. Develop a thug caste. When leaders who seek what I call a fascist shift want to close down an open society, they send paramilitary groups of scary young men out to terrorize citizens. The black shirts roam the Italian countryside beating up communists. The brown shirts stage violent rallies throughout Germany. And who do we have here today? Young youths in the DHS, in the TSA, in FEMA. The same exact thing. So we're heading down the path, and so far we can see point 1, point 2, point 3 already done. Point 4, and this scared the crap out of me because this was done way back in 2007. Set up an internal surveillance system. NSA spying using internet and phone system. I added that part because that is what's happening right now. We just found out about it. Number 5, harass citizens groups. Harass the people who like gun, constitutionalists. Harass religious group like Christians. Harass, people who are, American Civil Liberty Union. Anyone anti-government protesters, the Occupy Wall Street people. This is what they did. They're harassing citizen groups and putting them on lists, categorizing the groups. Number 6, engage in arbitrary detention and release. In a closing or closed society, there is a list of dissidents and opposition leaders. You are targeted in this way once you are on the list, and it is hard to get off the list. I didn't write that part. This is the list that we see that TSA has. The other lists that we don't even know they have been created from them spying on us and placing us into groups, so when the time comes, they know where to go. They know who to harass. They know who to take away and to put in prison without trial, to throw them in a gulag where there is no rule of law. Number 7, target key individuals, constitutionalists, journalists, bloggers, religious groups. We can see this happening now. They're passing bills to say who's a journalist, who isn't a journalist. They're actually going after journalists, the real ones, not the real ones, the ones who they perceive are journalists. And there was just one journalist that was in this car accident or bomb, Hastings, I believe it was, and you can see it is already starting. Number 8, control the press. This is what they've been trying to do for years. Since the internet was born, it's very difficult to control the press. So what do? They go to create a bill and say who is the journalist and who isn't the journalist. And this is how they will control the press once again. Because you have to remember, every single dictator, Germany, Italy, Stalin, followed all of these steps. And back then, there was no internet. Today, they have a problem. Let's move on here. Dissent equals treason. Cast dissent as treason and criticism as espionage. Every closing society does this, just as it elaborates laws that increasingly criminalizes certain kinds of speech and expand the definition of spy and traitor. Wow. Snowden, he is now listed as committed treason and a traitor. Not the people who were spying on Americans, who lied to Congress, who violated the Fourth Amendment, who broke the law of the Constitution, who violated the people's rights. No, the person who ratted them out, which he should have done, which any person should have done, is now considered a traitor or a spy. And you see how this is working. And here is where the circle closes. Most Americans do not realize that since September of last year, When Congress wrongfully, foolishly passed the Military Commission Act of 2006, the President has the power to call any U.S. citizen an enemy combatant. He has the power to define what enemy combatant means. The President can also delegate to anyone he chooses in the executive branch the right to define enemy combatant any way he or she wants and then seize Americans accordingly. You know the law that they passed. It's called the NDAA. And this fits in exactly what the President can do. We also saw that Eric Holder and Rand Paul had a discussion about, can drones be fired on Americans? And Eric Holder said, unless they're enemy combatants, we will not fire on them. Here we are. So if you're against the government, you will be considered an enemy combatant. Number 10, suspend the rule of law. Declare martial law. The President now has the ability to declare martial law over the land. And I've been saying this over and over and over about the main event of cyber attacks, but if they're going to try with all these false flags, especially during Independence Day, where we have a lot of gun owners marching on all the state capitals, a toy gun march. We have this Quantum Dawn drill. We have a lot of chemical drills in New York City, biological drills. You can see where all this is heading. This summer is going to be an incredibly, how should I say this, troubling time for those people who are asleep, who are going to start waking up, and who are not going to understand what is going on, why their rights all of a sudden are being taken away, why martial law was declared, why are they coming to my house. And we're going to see this happen very quickly. And if you watch the video from Naomi Wolf, she says that this doesn't happen slowly. It increases in speed, and it happens very quickly once the system starts to close down around the people, and we can see this happening. And I believe that starting this Friday and through next week and through the summer, we're going to see a lot of things happen, because even in Syria, in Syria, they're looking at an onslaught of going into Syria and invading Syria. Biden has come out and Kerry has come out saying that they'll have the gun laws and the UN Arms Treaty signed by August and put into law. And you have to remember, all these things are pending in the Senate. Everything is waiting there for an event. CISPA is waiting there, and that is the internet bill, where it would make all this spying and all this stuff that they're doing all legal. And we can see what is happening. So listen, everyone, I want to thank you very much for listening today. All the new listeners, thank you for listening to me. All those people who are commenting on YouTube, thank you for keeping me aware of other things. Again, I learn from you just like you learn from me. We're in this together. And those people who post things on the People, I learn from you guys over there. And I am just, shouting all of this out to get people to listen. The more people that understand what is going on, the better we will be, the better we can stick together and fight this, because our founding fathers, they knew that this was coming. If you read what they have said and everything that they put in place, they knew this was going to happen again. They knew that this was temporary. They knew we were going to have to fight for our freedom once again. And this is why they put this into place. Thank you, everyone. Be well, be safe, and especially, please, be prepared. Thank you.